We're live, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Good morning, Borada, everyone. Thank you for your attendance at the Thursday, 16th July meeting of Powys County Council Governance and Audit Committee. We'll move directly to apologies, and I'll invite Carrie-Anne, please, to run us through apologies. Carrie-Anne?
Good morning, it's Kath, Chair.
Kath, right, okay.
It's okay. Okay. Officers who have provided apologies, Debbie Jones, but we do have Sarah Bufton attending, Diane Reynolds, John Forsey. From Cabinet, we've received apologies from Councillor Jake Berriman and Councillor Matthew Dorrance. And from committee, we've received apologies from Councillor Chris Walsh, who's on other council business, and Councillor Graham Breeze. I'm not aware of any other apologies. If anybody has those, I'm happy to take those now.
Thanks very much, Kath. And I understand Councillor Pete needs to leave early, and he'll just remove himself from the meeting when he has to. And just for colleagues to be aware that Councillor Chris was able to attend the pre-meeting yesterday and has sent me some questions on 4 of the agenda items, which I'll feed in on his behalf at the appropriate point. Item 2, are there any disclosures of interest in connection with the items on today's agenda, please? No, there are none. We have helpfully got agenda item 3, which is a little log of the outstanding actions, which we are invited to note, and I will pause on that table and invite any comments or questions, and just explain that we don't have minutes for today's meeting because we only met 3 weeks ago, and just the process of clearing and translating the minutes means that they're not available today, but we do have our little action log. And I can see Councillor Jackie, you had your hand up first, so I'll go to Councillor Jackie, and then I'll go to Councillor Pete, and then Ian Halstead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm aware that the action on the agreed action log about the nutrient management plans has been there since last November, and I am very aware that members do want to have some feedback. I do have some feedback for you today, but I wasn't able to get it into the papers because the Y Nutrient Management Board didn't meet till last Wednesday, and I wasn't able to update on what they were doing until they'd met on Wednesday. But I have sent a report to you, and I hope that will be available at the next meeting. But if you're happy for me to give you a quick verbal update, I can do that.
Please do so.
Thank you. I know the committee wanted assurance that the USC and Y nutrient management plans would have clear timetables. I am able to give you some assurance on that, but the position does differ between the 2 nutrient management boards. But there is a clearer basis for assurance. For the USC, the plan has been prepared and published. It has moved beyond the preparation and is now about implementation and monitoring. So that's quite clear. For the Y, the work is more complex, and I have shared this with you before because it is cross-border. However, there is now a programme evidence review in July, which has taken place, options work in August, appraisals in September, and a draft action plan will be reported in October, and finalisation expected in late October or early November, which will give those give the assurance on those timelines. So if the committee can take assurance from that and understand that there will be a defined timeline in place, I'm happy for you to ask me any further questions. I will be keeping an eye on this. I do attend both of the nutrient management boards, and I would therefore suggest that the action is substantially addressed, and I now will be able to provide you with any further updates should you require them after November.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jackie. I'm not going to take questions on Councillor Jackie's update at today's meeting, but we look forward to receiving further information in further assurance information in due course, Councillor Jackie. Thank you, Councillor Pete.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think we're still awaiting a. I know it's going to be a confidential report around a particular high value case that was in the fraud report from about June last year. So I don't know if that should be listed on those outstanding actions there.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pete. I believe Jane's team is going to write a confidential update on that to members because it's not something that we can discuss in public. Jane?
Yes, and of course it will probably not have the detail about around the specifics for obvious reasons, but yeah, I've asked that to be drawn together. So as soon as it's available, we will make sure we issue it out to members of the committee.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Pete. Thank you, Jane. Ian?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have an action on there around the root cause analysis that we did at the end of last year, where we identified that there was a significant difference between management root causes corporately and management root causes in schools. And so members asked if we could give a bit of detailed information around that. I haven't done that yet, but I guess I just would like some clarification. We're just starting to, in October, we'll be starting to step into the next root cause analysis. So I guess I've got two options. I can produce something for the next meeting in September, which specifically looks at those issues, or I can leave it till October and pick it up as part of the wider review. Does committee have any particular preference?
Would anybody like to view a preference? Also seek views from colleagues. I'm not hearing any particular views, Ian. My instinct would be to bring it all together comprehensively for October, please.
I think I would feel the same, Chair, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Mary, I can see your hand is up as well.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to update really in terms of the committee's request to have a risk workshop. As you'll be aware, the lead risk officer met with yourself and the vice chair. So we have agreed the scope for the meeting for the workshop, and the provisional date has been set for the autumn, and we'll be drawing in some external expertise from provided up by our insurers as part of our deal with them to support that workshop as well.
Thank you, Mary. Look forward to that. I'm sure other members will. So just to assure members that we'll bring forward and sharing more information about that workshop as Mary and Bets design it going forward. So thank you very much. I'll move us on if there are no further questions. Just to say as we move on, Kath, carry on. I think the committee has found drawing the actions out into a table extremely helpful. So if we could see that again, it just helps to focus minds when we're looking at past actions.
Of course, Chair.
I'll move us on to the items of substance for today's meeting. We start with agenda item 4 and invite Audit Wales colleagues to speak to their report on recruitment and retention, and then we will have the opportunity to hear a response from the leader, Councillor Jake, and officers Gemma Gabriel and Jane Thomas. Alison Lewis is leading this item, I believe, for Audit Wales.
Yes, Chair.
Alison, you're there. Alison, also, I believe, is this your first formal meeting with Powys GAC?
It is indeed.
It is indeed. I thought it was. So on behalf of the committee, Alison, I'd like to welcome you to the meeting, and we look for the next few months and years. You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair. So, yes, a pleasure to meet you all today. For those that haven't met me, I'm Alison Lewis. I'm the incoming performance audit lead for Powys County Council, taking over from my colleague Gareth Jones, who you'll have been familiar with over the last year or so. I have done a couple of pieces of work previously in Powys, so not totally unfamiliar to me, did a recent piece on governance, which Governance and Audit Committee have received that report. So know a little bit about the council, but looking forward very much to working with you going forward. So that brings us to the item in front of you today. This is recruitment and retention. It is what we call part of a thematic review, and that just means we do it in all 22 councils. So it's the same piece of work done in all 22 councils over the course of the last year, and will be in the various stages of reporting across those councils. But the report in front of you today is specific to Powys County Council. So I'm going to assume whenever I report that members have read their agenda papers, so I won't go through the things in detail, but I will just kind of highlight those key findings and the recommendations that we're making. I'll then pass over to Gemma Gabriel, who's going to take the council through the management response form to let the committee know what the council is doing or intending to do in response to those recommendations made. With the chair's approval, I will present a summary of our report. I'll pass straight over to Gemma, who'll take you through the MRF. And after we've both spoken, we'll be happy to take any questions from the committee. So that the review we had looked at the challenges the council faces in recruiting and retaining staff. This included how well the council understands those challenges, the steps it's taking to respond to them, and how it reviews the value for money of its approaches. It's pleasing to tell committee that we found that the council has a good understanding of its recruitment and retention challenges, and that it is successfully using a range of approaches to address these. We did also identify some areas for improvement related to the data it holds on the number of vacant posts, which wasn't correct at the time of our audit. And we also found that the council does not always assess the value for money of all its approaches to recruitment and retention. So on the basis of those, we made 2 recommendations to cover these areas. These were to correct the data on the number of staff vacancies and to improve how it's assessing value for money on recruitment and retention. But again, I'd like to say a positive report, good self-awareness in the council, good actions being taken in this area, good engagement. You know, this is a positive report in front of members today. The council has completed a management response form on the basis of those 2 recommendations. So as part of our process, we have to review that response form before it comes in charge of Governance and Audit Committee or in charge of those charged with governance. So basically, we look at whether that response is sufficiently specific to give assurance that the audit body will take action, rather than just some vague commitment to do something. We're looking at whether there's clear and reasonable timescales and whether those responsibilities for activities have been properly allocated to somebody within the audited body. Then to meet our obligations under our Code of Audit Practice, we're required to share those observations with you as Governance and Audit Committee. And again, I'm pleased to tell GAC that we've reviewed the Council's management response form. We're satisfied with the response set out by the Council on its intended actions, and we feel that it reflects proper considerations of our audit findings and recommendations. So Gemma Gabriel is with us today in committee. She's one of the senior managers in HR here at Powys County Council. She's going to take you through the management response form. And then after Gemma's spoken, as I said, happy to take any questions that committee have. Over to you, Gemma. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Alison. Morning, everyone. So in terms of the 2 recommendations, the management response that we put forward responds to that, as Alison's outlined. The first one was in relation to the inaccuracies on the vacancy data on the dashboards that we had. This wasn't something that was new to us. We were aware that our vacancy data on Trent wasn't necessarily accurate. The reason for that is when posts are on our system holds all posts that we pay against on the system in the establishment. should somebody be vacant for any reason, whether that's maternity or sickness, or if we're looking to advertise a post that somebody hasn't vacated yet, we need to create a ghost post on the system. That ghost post then is removed, then it should be removed by services when that person leaves and a substantive post holder returns. That isn't always happening. So that's what's created this the inaccuracies on the posts that are on the system. So it's something that we were aware of. So we were using different ways to monitor the costs through management of change processes, through the data that finance held on vacancies and what we were actually paying against. But as we were introducing our workforce dashboards, we wanted to ensure that that vacancy data to support our recruitment and retention was part of that. So the dashboard has highlighted where those inaccuracies are. So we've already taken steps at the point the audit was undertaken to work with services to correct some of that data, and that work will now continue. But in addition to that, once that data is accurate on the system, we're putting processes and procedures in place to make sure that the integrity of that data is maintained moving forward, so that we don't get those duplication errors occurring moving forward. So that first step will be for us to work with services just to ensure that that data is accurate, that we hold, and then it's about putting those procedures in place then to make sure that that data is maintained accurately moving forward. The second recommendation was around ensuring that we evaluate the value for money of its approaches to recruitment and retention. During the audit, we were able to share some of the ways in which we did do that, particularly around some vacancies that were advertised. We were testing out different innovative ways to try and attract people to work for the council. So the cost of that, which was quite small in most cases, we measured that against the number of applicants and the number of people that were appointed in that role, so that we could measure the success of those initiatives and assess what worked in what areas, because one size doesn't fit all. So it was about trying to understand what worked best for what roles. However, we do recognise that we can do some further work around those value for money approaches, particularly some of the broader initiatives, not just around the cost of recruitment and how many people we get applying and appointed for roles, but some of our broader work that we're doing. In fact, I remember a few months ago, I came with a deep dive of recruitment and retention and talked through some of the initiatives we were taking to support recruitment and retention around our investments in apprentices, work experience, developing our brand. It's about how can we measure the success of some of those initiatives that we're putting in place to really see the true value for money that we're getting for all of the initiatives that we're putting in place. To support some of this, we're aware that Audit Wales are attending the Human Resource Directors Network, I think in September time, which we're a part of that network, to share some of their findings from the audits that's been undertaken across all the councils. And one of the areas we understand that they're going to be sharing with us is some thoughts around how other councils are doing this. So we can look at some of that best practice in other councils and take some of that and put some of those initiatives in here so that we're able to measure what we're doing effectively. So that's towards the end of September. Following that, then we'll look at our workforce plans and our people strategy. What is it that we're looking to achieve, and then work out how we can measure then the success of those in terms of value for money. And we'll have all of those actions in place by the end of December.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jenna. I'll open the floor to questions. Pete. I'll bring in Pete and then I'll go to Councillor Chris's questions, which I have here, and then Gareth.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, maybe more a question for Mary or Jane, actually. It's related to these vacancy rates being incorrect. And on some other papers, I see when we're looking at our actual financial position versus the budget, the reason, or a consistent reason for us being below budget, is because we've got outstanding vacancies. So I'm just beginning to wonder how these, if you like, incorrect workforce data is impacting, say, financial management and budgeting.
Shall I come in there, Chair?
Yes, please, Larry.
Thank you. So the financial position is based on staffing records that finance keep. So the vacancies that have contributed to the underspend are true vacancies that have been budgeted for but not filled, rather than some of the vacancies within the Trent system, which Gemma's already explained. So it's not sort of double counted or reflected in the financial position. Those vacancies that are on the Trent system, they're not reflected within the financial forecasting unless they're genuine vacancies and there's budget available for them.
That's right. It was just intriguing me slightly, Mary. So what's not a genuine vacancy, and are we then running two systems? So we got vacancies on Trent versus vacancies you've got in a financial system somewhere. Sorry, I may have misunderstood.
So we have detailed staffing spreadsheets that we use within finance, which are based on the actual staffing approved staffing setup for each service. As Gemma's explained, there are reasons why you need to have additional posts then within the Trent system to allow for recruitment and that kind of thing, and some overlap there. So we do try and make sure that we base the financial information on our financial records, that we do that cross check with Trent as well, and with service managers, obviously, as we work through that. But yeah, there's no duplication if that's your concern.
I guess it was more the concern was around, I think the phrase was ghost. It was whether some of these sort of ghost vacancies are actually in the budget, but I think you're assuring me they're not in the budget, and you've got another spreadsheet somewhere else. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Jean, did you want to add to that, or
Only briefly, I was going to say what Councillor Peters has just said. So we do not use those, but I think importantly as well, when finance are doing the budgets, they have those conversations with the service to make sure that we're only counting the posts that are actually approved in the structure. So yeah, you're absolutely spot on in terms of they do not contribute to that underspend.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Councillor Peake, for your questions. I'm going to just look at Councillor Chris's questions. Councillor Chris was also focusing on the reported gaps in the workforce, and he was asking, as a result of reported gaps in the workforce, were there any risks to service delivery and or residents at any point due to the workforce gaps? Gemma.
Yeah, thank you. I think there are vacancies and there are some hard to fill roles across the council. I think what the report recognises is that we are aware of those and we're putting plans in place to address them. We're also working, across with other local authorities. Some of those areas of hard to fill roles are common across other authorities and not necessarily unique to us. Inevitably that does present services with a challenge and could impact service delivery but the workforce planning processes that we have in place, the strategic workforce planning process, which are very comprehensive, that draws on all of this data and considers all of those issues, clearly enables services to put clear plans in place to mitigate against the risk of that. So where we're aware of staff shortages or difficult to recruit areas, we look quite creatively about how we can cover the work in those areas. So we will look to redesign potentially structures. If we're unable to recruit to certain posts, are there other posts that could support the service in a different way that we are able to recruit to? Are there other cover arrangements that we can put in place? The workforce planning process provides managers with support from people services to put those plans in place to mitigate against those risks, and we'll support them with those hard to fill areas. But yes, there are some challenges across the council, but we are fully aware of those.
Thanks. And a final question on this from Councillor Chris. Where workforce data has been incorrect, are there issues around staff understanding value for money and the processes? Is this an issue of a lack of experience, a lack of qualified staff, or a training issue?
Is that in relation to identifying the value for money across
Yeah.
the initiatives? No, I think it's something that we've put in place because we constantly looking at the evaluation and the impact of what we're doing in the delivery, and the strategic workforce planning again enables us on an annual basis to review what we've done. So we use a quadrant in the strategic workforce planning process. So we look back and we look forward, and then we put the plans in place and look what the additional support that we need. And those enable us to reflect on what's happened and look at what's worked and what hasn't worked. I think what we need to do is just formalise some of that and think a bit more broadly around the wider range of initiatives that we're put in place. So where we've looked traditionally at costs of recruitment and the impact that that's had, we can look at the impact that some of those broader initiatives have got. So I think we do need to look to other councils as well and learn from what they're doing, which is what we're looking to do in September. But yeah, I think we do have the skills in place. It's just putting those plans to make sure that we report against some of those measures that we identify.
Thanks, Gemma. And from me, just before I bring Gareth in, I was pleased to see the references and the responses to value for money, and it's mentally made the broader connection to the work that Mary Thomas is leading on the council's value for money strategy and what will become an annual report on value for money. So it just looked like a really good opportunity to draw on some real evidence and demonstrably respond positively to some of Audit Wales's previous comments on our approaches to value for money. So it's really good to see that it's all potentially coming together in a really constructive way. Gareth, and then I'll bring in Councillor Adam and probably make that the last question on this item. Gareth. Gareth, I think you're still on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I would have liked to have seen some recognition in the report about, I think it's a small but a valuable contribution to the mix of recruitment is one of secondments. Secondments are relatively more easy now to arrange with flexible working that the council operates, and secondees, I think, as well as bringing fresh blood into the organisation, they also bring different thinking, and all of that adds to contribute to the general health of the organisation. And I think if you get secondees from partner organisations, that's great for cross-fertilisation of ideas and seeing the other side of the coin. So it'd be good to get to see if the council is actively pursuing secondments, particularly with hard to fill jobs.
Thanks, Gareth. I can see that both Councillor Jackie and Jane have got their hands up. Jackie, were you wanting to respond to Gareth's point?
No, I wanted to make an observation at the end, if that's okay, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Jane, you probably want to respond to Gareth, yeah.
I do indeed. So I know within corporate services, we use secondments quite readily. So we use them seconding people into posts for progression and development. So we've used them quite a lot around that. We do use secondees elsewhere across the organisation and between departments where people are seconded into different roles. Again, it's experience, it's learning, all of those things that happen. And we do some cross-organisation secondees. We currently have some secondments from our comms team working in health, for example. So we do some of that. Whether it's applied routinely across the organisation, Gemma may be able to give us a little bit more information on that, but it is definitely one of the tools in the box, so to speak, both in terms of development, but also supporting some of those vacancies as they arise.
Thanks, Jane. I can also see Richard's hand up. Richard, did you want to come in on this point?
Yes, please, Chair. Just to say
Thank you.
that I think the observations there made around secondees are really important. Certainly from an education point of view, we make very good use of secondees. Secondees coming into the authority from outside of Powys to bring that fresh thinking that you've spoken about and that alternative perspective. But increasingly within education, particularly within our school improvement teams, we're moving to a model where our school improvement advisors are seconded head teachers from within Powys. Clearly, it relies on the skill and the capacity of the head and ensuring that their own home school isn't jeopardized when the head teacher's released. But what we're finding is it's bringing expertise into the authority, but equally building capacity in the system as deputy heads and assistant heads in home schools have the opportunity to step up. So from an education point of view, for me, it is how we build that sustainable improvement across the system. So it's an important part of our strategy. Diolch.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful to know. Thank you. Thanks for that. I'll go to Councillor Adam to ask his question, and then I'll give Councillor Jackie the opportunity to say something at the end, and then we'll move on. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Chair. My question has some links to the one just tabled, because I think the report quite clearly recognises, and we know as an authority, that we are a restricted pool and recruitment at times difficult. And so I think I probably would just swing behind and say if we could see secondment as not a priority part of the process, but definitely up there. I think, Jane, you touched on the fact that we do use it, but do we position it as a first come? I think that links to the question I was going to ask, which is we know we also run a whole series of posts based on grants, and grants come and go, and then we sort of acquire good knowledge and use it. And a line of inquiry here is around: are we doing enough to hold on to those? However, we might achieve that redeployment, upskilling. And I suppose my corollary that would link to the secondment question is once we've done that and we've retained them in the organisation somewhere, are we making full use of those skills and experiences? So yes, a form of secondment back, but we know we have some very skilled people scattered around the organisation, not always brought to the table when there are either task and finish opportunities or challenges or transformational programs running. So it's just whether we can say a little bit about how we hold on to those staff at the end of grants, and then how we make use of them once we have embedded them somewhere else in the organisation.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. Gemma, could you say something briefly about you?
Yes, certainly. Again, it comes back to the strategic workforce planning. So fixed term contracts are a part of that. So service managers will go through their fixed term contracts, look to see when those are coming to an end. When there are larger grants coming to an end, for example, we saw the SPF funding and we're now looking at the RIF funding, then we will look more corporately at the impact of the ending of those grant fundings and see where we might be able to redeploy, and look at the skills analysis of those individuals and see where we might be able to place them in the organisation. And again, I think the point around keeping and retaining skills is really important, and we've got succession planning, and we're looking at talent management as well. We're really identifying what skills people have got and where they're able to be best placed across the organisation. and secondments can be useful there as well, where we've also supported people to second out. So they will go out to another organisation, spend a period of time there, and then they're bringing that experience back to us, which is equally as important, I think, and of a benefit to us as an organisation.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Gemma. I'll give Councillor Jackie the opportunity to say something on this agenda item, and then we'll move on to item 5.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm grateful for that. It is to do with reviewing value for money on page 12 and specifically point 29, which was about looking at recruitment and how we're recruiting people. In HTR, we had a massive problem with recruitment, and we identified, or the team identified, that one of the problems was the application form. It was a very generic application form, which was very difficult for some people to complete for some of the vacancies that we had. They worked quite hard on changing those application forms to make them much easier to complete and much more open and transparent, I think, for a lot of people. And I also think they made changes to encourage more gender-based applications as well, so that we could encourage more women into what were very male-dominated areas, but we know that women could undertake those. That has made quite a big difference, and those differences are beginning to come through. But the value for money, making sure that people who do apply can apply easily for the type of work that they want to do in a way that they want to do it, has saved quite a lot of money, because we're not reapplying, or we're not putting out more applications again. So I would be very keen to find out, as this report has asked, more information about that as we're going forward, and just seeing what an impact that has, because I don't know what the impact is. I know that these measures have been put in place, but I don't know what the impact is. And I'd be very keen to understand that going forward. So just a plea from me, but just to say a lot of work went into that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Jackie. That's helpful to know. I'll thank Audit Wales colleagues, Alison, and I'll thank Gemma for their contributions to this item, as well as Jane. And I'll move us on to agenda item 5, which is the SWAP annual report. And I'll invite Ian Halstead and Kevin Price to lead on this item. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. It's item 5, as the Chair has just mentioned, and it's the annual opinion report for 25-26. So under the global internal audit standards, as your head of internal audit, I'm required to provide an objective annual opinion on certain aspects like governance, risk management, and internal control to the Governance and Audit Committee. So to fulfill that requirement, the annual overall opinion for 25-26 in the report states that it's reasonable assurance, and it reflects that there is generally sound systems of governance, risk management, and internal control, and those are in place and operating. This opinion is supported by the delivery of 52 audits and management reports, and those include 34 that have some kind of opinion. They're opinion-based. And of those, 71% would be either reasonable or substantial assurance. So the vast majority is positive. However, the report recognises that there are some areas that require improvement, and there are 10 limited assurances in there, which identify significant concerns, and these have all been reported to the committee individually. So you've seen all these reports in detail. The report also notes that the strategic risk coverage was mostly good or adequate, and that counter-fraud arrangements were positive, and that risk management was continuing to mature. However, these matters, the limited assurance matters, did not form any high corporate risks, and very much a positive is that the council has implemented or is on track to implement 95% of the agreed actions. So in summing up, overall the report presents a balanced position. While there are operational weaknesses and there are areas that require continual monitoring and improvement, management has responded positively to audit findings. If there are any questions, I'll willingly try and answer them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And just before I open the floor to questions, I'd like to thank Ian and his team for the report, which whilst there are shortcomings in places, I think overall we can take a level of assurance from the reasonable assessment. And I would just like to add that over the past couple of years, we have seen a steady improvement in progress against outstanding management actions, and I think that's very, very helpful to the corporate health of Powys County Council. I'm sure we should probably have some questions. I'll open the floor to questions to Ian and/or officers on the annual audit report, internal audit report. Councillor Peat.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, and thanks, Ian. And I note your comments as well there, Chair. I guess just what was sort of taxing me slightly is I know this opinion is based on the audit work that's been done. But I'm just slightly concerned that it may be giving a wrong impression and saying everything's, really good. Whereas I think from what I'm seeing from the reviews we've done so far around the waste and recycling, there was like poor governance around project management and lack of risk identification. So somewhere in the background, that's just lurking away for me, which is saying the opinion in reality isn't as good as what's being shown there. And I just wonder whether or not there's a case for SWAP to sort of revisit the risk management framework, or perhaps do a separate audit of our project management, project governance, etc.
Thanks, Councillor Peat. So I think Councillor Peat is querying the overall reasonable assessment given some of the audits that have been limited. I also think making points about the relationship to audit with the risk management framework. So Ian, and I can see Jane would like to come in on that as well. Ian, if you could perhaps talk about the reporting cycle and when certain audits come into the cycle, because some of the audits that we have before us today would come into next year's annual report rather than this annual report.
Yes, Chair. That's mostly true. It depends when the work was substantially undertaken. So if we've undertaken the majority of the work in last year, but it sometimes takes a month or two to agree the draft and get it over the line and get actions in there, then we will pull it back into the year where we think it's mostly substantially relevant and where the work was done. So that's the gem. But there are times where it extends beyond that deadline and then it falls into the next one. So that's the timescale. In terms of the general opinion, I welcome a challenge from Audit Committee. I think that's exactly what Audit Committee is here to do, and challenge opinions like this. I think every organisation is a local authority is a complex organisation, and in any complex organisation, there are going to be elements of very good practice, compliance, but there are going to be areas where practice can be improved. And I think that's what internal audit is there for, to identify and report on those. And our planning does kind of focus on those areas. But I think the opinion is given, one, from the proportion of work that's undertaken and the outcomes. And generally, the outcomes for this year are in line with other years of reasonable assurance as well. But also, it's from my understanding of things that go on in the background as well. So some of the strategies, the approaches, risk management is important, and I think that we will undertake a piece of risk management. Obviously, our colleagues in Wales Audit did it last year. Pieces of risk management will be a continual addition to the audit plan, and we will look at that going forward. So we will give you some assurance along those lines. Project management, I will look at the plan and see whether we've got some project management work in that, and I'll assess whether we need to cover some risks in that. So I'll happily pick that up as well. But generally, I would say, in comparison with other years, in comparison with the picture that I see as the head of internal audit, in comparison with swap, where we're positioned in swap, you can't particularly say that one local authority is like every other local authority, but it can give us a rough guide. So I would say we're roughly in line with where other local authorities are as well. I hope that answers the question, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Pete, for your question. And Ian, I will bring in Jane. But I am quite persuaded of Councillor Pete's final point around the suggestion of bringing an audit on project and programme management. I think that would be incredibly helpful. And for me, if we were able to add that to the plan, there would be something about consistent application and having some kind of methodology to determine the scale and nature of that management. Jane wants to come in. Jane.
Yeah, if I can, I want to talk about project management, but just in terms of the opinion, and I know the comment was around, there are some limited assurance reports. I think it's important to note, though, as an organisation, we don't shy away from looking at areas where we think we may have weaknesses or things need strengthening. And I think we definitely make sure that those areas are included in our annual audit plans so that we do look at some of that and then are able to strengthen the arrangements based on the findings. So I think if we didn't see any limited assurance reports, that would be a big question mark for me as to not being an accurate reflection of what's across the organisation. So I think that's important. I totally understand the spotlight on project management following yesterday's committee, which was a very difficult committee to hear. And I think reflecting on that myself overnight as well, we do have a really good, robust project management structure and process within the organisation. And many of our projects follow that and comply with the requirements of that. I think based on yesterday, I appreciate why committee wants to look at that, and I think that's a good idea. And we'd be happy to share that with you. And I think we do have some really good experienced project managers across the organisation as well. We have an extensive transformation programme. The governance, the risk management, the processes, the reporting, all of the things that are in place for that programme show us consistently delivering against those project management framework. And I think it's really important to note that what we need to ensure is that we have compliance with that across all of the projects. Albeit how big or small, there needs to be that structure because that is what helps you get things right and prevents the failure in the first place. So we totally acknowledge that, but I just want to give committee assurance that what you saw yesterday is not the picture across the whole organisation, and I think that's very important to recognise. But you will see that evidence as we do that piece of work. So thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you, Jane, and thank you, Councillor Pete, for raising it in the context of Ian's report, and thank you for your assurance, Jane, that the frameworks and processes and governance exists. And I do not want to prolong and open up yesterday's discussion at this meeting because that's not what it's about. But I very much welcome your recognition that there is something about consistency of application and compliance, and we will look forward to receiving further assurance about that in due course. I will ask if there are any other questions in connection with Ian Swap's annual report to us for the period 25-26. Councillor Adam.
Mine's a very prosaic one. I think you touched on it, which is what are all the reports that build up to it? And I was framing a question for later on when we look at our work programme about just being able to see the full pipeline of all the individual swap tasks that are doing. But because I think that then does relate to this question about do we think there are emissions and whether putting our hand in the air and saying, look, we think one on project management would be relevant becomes easier because we can see the complete pipeline. I suspect we've seen it before, and I suspect it says somewhere that I just haven't dug it out. But I would welcome a sort of a noddy guide listing so that we can look at it in the round.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Adam. So earlier in the year, we approved the annual audit plan. That's one of GAC's core responsibilities. So Ian and his team brought the annual audit plan to us in March. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember the date, but we have approved the annual audit plan, and then on a quarterly basis, Ian brings to us a quarterly report on progress against plan. And Ian and Mary update us on management action against finalised plans, and we have the opportunity at any point through the year to take stock of the business that is crossing the committee's table, to make a risk assessment and to invite Ian or to suggest additional items and reprioritisation of the plan in discussion with Ian and with executive colleagues where we see emergent risks that we would wish to be prioritised within the plan. So that's all within our gift, and it's the starting point is our approval of the annual plan. And prior to bringing the annual plan paper, Ian and his team routinely canvass GAC members for an assessment of where they sense the risks to lie. So we also have a role in influencing the preparation of the plan, and then we formally approve it. But there is an opportunity to make suggestions throughout the year. So our committee content to note Ian's plan and Ian's annual report. Yes. Yeah. So we're content to note Ian's annual report and to thank our swap colleagues for that report. And I will therefore move us on to item 6, which is SWAP's report on school voluntary funds audit. And we also have Dr. Richard Jones and Sarah Quibble and Anne-Marie Davis with us. And I think, but I'm not 100% sure, so forgive me, that Councillor James Gibson-Watt may be with us as well for this item. But Ian, if you could introduce this report, and then I'll give Richard the opportunity, or Richard and his team the opportunity to update us on the management action, and then I'll invite questions.
Thank you, Chair. This report was substantially done by my colleague Gail Moore. I don't know whether Gail's been able to join us today, but I'll give you a brief outline of the findings. I guess I'll quickly explain what a school fund is. A school voluntary fund is money raised voluntarily through activities such as fundraising or pupil contributions or trips or donations. It's held separately from the school's delegated budget, so it doesn't form part of the delegated budget, but it's there to use to provide opportunities for the pupils of the school. So that's primarily what it's there for. It's there for the benefit of the schools. But it's important to note it doesn't belong to the council. The money does not belong to the council. However, the audit is important because the people that administer the funds are council employees, and there's also a reputational risk to the council if there is failure in the management of those funds. In terms of the audit itself, a key message from this audit is that while many schools have appropriate arrangements in place to manage voluntary funds, and there are many, the overall level of assurance remains limited due to significant inconsistencies in governance, oversight and financial control across the whole county. The audit also highlighted the scale of funds, as the balance report at that time was 1.38 million, so it's significant. And given the value of those funds involved and the weaknesses identified, the report demonstrates a need for very much stronger central oversight, control and support. Management has agreed to a range of actions to strengthen the county-wide arrangements, including updating guidance and policies, a mandatory governance checklist, enhanced monitoring and escalation processes where schools don't comply with the arrangements. Also improve reporting and training for staff and governors. These measures should help establish a more robust and consistent framework so that pupils can genuinely benefit from these funds rather than them just growing into savings funds. I think that's key. That the children should benefit from these funds, and the arrangement should make sure that those funds are protected and secured to benefit the children. Chair, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Before I take questions to Ian, I'll invite the education team to update us on their response and the ongoing management action. And I can see that Dr. Richard Jones has opened up his microphone. Richard, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, thanks so much. I'll just pick up on some of the points that Ian has made. Obviously, it's an important report. Service recognises the need for that tighter grip in terms of its oversight, but also that increased level of expectation on schools around their management of voluntary funds as well. So Ian referenced there the updated guidance, standardised guidance, which the service has now produced around the management of funds, and that will cover, amongst other things, some key fault lines that the report identifies, guidance to support better record keeping, to make explicit audit requirements and what the governance standards are that we expect our schools to uphold. Alongside that, we are also strengthening our oversight through mandated audits and declaration processes. So, as well as making the expectation explicit, providing the guidance for schools to meet that expectation, we are also strengthening our oversight. Part of that oversight has been to consider how concerns are flagged within the education service, and we've identified a route there from service managers to extended education leadership team, heads of service, and to me as director in order to escalate concerns in a timely fashion. And then the final part that I just wanted to add, as well as us as an education service providing strengthened standardised guidance, we're also working to create peer networks across our schools so that business managers or bursars, head teachers can also have that network of support around them meeting their requirements, which we're now placing on them. So just to strengthen that, some of the things that Ian referenced, but most importantly to acknowledge, the need that we need to tighten in this area. Sarah might want to come in and just add some further detail around that. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you very much. Sarah?
Yeah, just to add a couple of points, if that's okay, Chair. Where schools have been experiencing issues identifying an appropriate person to undertake the audit, we've been providing intensive support where required to make sure that they are able to identify. And just to point out that in the scheme for financing schools, there is a clause which, should a school continue to fail to identify someone, we are able to identify a paid person and charge that to the schools. We would hope we wouldn't get to that point, and Richard raised around the escalation, but just to point out that part is there within the scheme for financing schools.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you, Richard and Sarah. John, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. My question, Ian, really is, how confident are you with this assessment when only 54 schools actually compiled the questionnaire? It seems to me that if a school was non-compliant, it's going to be less likely to answer the questionnaire. And I worry that we've missed something here.
I think that's a good point, John. I think that when we sent the questionnaire out, there were a number of schools that don't hold voluntary funds, so they would not be part of that response. I think there are about 86 schools at the moment that we would have sent it to. So there is a chunk of information that is missing, and you could say that, people that maybe don't comply were less likely to respond. However, we also did independent verification where we went back to school central records, and we picked up the picture centrally, so that people that weren't responding, we picked up as part of a separate part of the review. However, I would like a greater response would give us a bigger picture, I suppose. But I feel we've got enough at the percentage level of responses at the moment to give us reasonable assurance that the picture we've given is correct, I would say.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Given the level of risk here, is it not possible to make replies to this sort of questionnaire mandatory?
I think that's something we can explore. I mean, compliance with the voluntary funds kind of rules in the school scheme of finance is mandatory, and so, but we can certainly explore about how we can engage with the school service, engage with the schools to try and get a higher response rate. And it might be an escalation process where we don't have a response, that then we send it out and we push that to the school service, who can help us get a better response. Might be the way forward.
Okay, thank you, Ian.
Jane, did you want to come in on this point?
Just to add to this, school voluntary funds, I believe, Ian, are looked at when you do individual school audits as well. So they're captured under that process at an individual school level as well.
Correct.
Thanks. And Sarah?
Yes, I was Anne-Marie and myself were having a discussion with Gail, your colleague Ian, yesterday, and just considering whether an additional question could be added into the questionnaire, very explicitly asking, have they submitted in the last 12 months? So just something for consideration.
Thank you, Sarah. We'll consider that.
And Richard, would you?
Yeah. Thanks so much, Chair. I think John has made a really important point there around 54 schools submitting returns. So, Ian, I'd be really happy for us to work together and have a firmer plan for how we follow up with schools that don't respond to the audit. So I just want to perhaps note that as an action, Chair, to come out of this part of the discussion.
That's very, very welcome. Thank you very much for that assurance. Thanks, John, for the question, and thanks for the commitment to that valued governance action. Councillor Pete also has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a couple of random points, actually, I guess. I just building on that conversation there, and John's point is, I just wanted to understand what testing, if any, that SWAP do of the responses that they get to these questionnaires. Because there's one thing being told something, but are we being told the full story? The other bit, maybe my understanding is, just wanted to try and understand where the two proofs fit into this. And then finally, the reason for that question is I know this is about voluntary funds, is what other funds are there around? And if we're doing those funds correctly under governance and controls, why aren't we doing this right? Or if we're doing this wrong, are we looking after the other funds correctly? Because there might be an attitude of minds point there, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Pete. Ian?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Pete. In terms of testing, I think it was Jane that mentioned that we do go out to all of these schools in a rolling program, and we do have a deep dive of testing in these areas. So that's part of a separate assurance framework. In terms of this report, there are certain things that are opinion based in the questionnaire, and that's the opinion of the school. There are certain areas that we've then mapped that to local authority records. So there has been an independent testing around the audit process The payment processes, so we can see some of the payments and the accounts, so there has been significant independent verification in there that supports the questionnaire, and I'm confident that we are saying the right messages based on that. In terms of the PRU, was not part of the school audit program, but that's been added to that program, and the PRU will be visited. The two PRUs will be visited over one this year and one next year. So and they will. I don't know whether they have a voluntary fund. I suspect not, but we're still doing the PRUs as part of our audit program. In terms of other funds, yes, I think we are going to look at other funds as part of a piece of work that we're going to do anyway. So hopefully that will look at the wider thing around non-delegated kind of funds as well. So we recognise that there are other funds, and we are going to be doing a piece of work on that as well.
Thanks, both. Councillor Chris sent me some questions on this. He was also exploring the governance and financial controls, which I think have largely been covered by officers. But he did specifically ask around, is there a current risk of fraud? And if there is, what additional mitigations can be put in place? And Councillor Chris was also keen to explore what additional training and support could be needed and could be offered in school setting to help us improve performance in this area.
Would you like to answer the fraud question, Chair?
If you'd answer the fraud question, Ian, and then I'll go to Sarah, and then we'll need to bring this item to a close. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. There's always a risk of fraud. There's always a risk out there. That's why it's really important that we have these control measures in place. That's why it's really important to have oversight, that we do our audits. But ultimately, at the end of the day, these are funds that operate outside of the council's remit and control somewhat. And there will always be that risk. But the tighter the control environment, the less chance and opportunity to commit a fraud.
Thank you. Thanks, Ian. Sarah.
Yeah, just to add to that, all schools are required to do the mandatory fraud e-learning, the same as corporate staff. So that's one measure. It's not just head teachers that we talk to about unofficial funds. They're regularly discussed at the administrator network. So, and those reminders and updates about how they need to get them in, at what time, etc. And then when the updated guidance is rolled out at the beginning of the new academic year, there will be training sessions for schools, so they're really clear on any changes to the guidance and the template that we're going to issue that should help them collate it a bit more easily as well.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you very much. Ian, final word then.
Yes, Chair, just a final word, and it's about something different, actually. I think from my perspective, we've identified some really good actions and improvements here. The key of this is mostly about the purpose of a voluntary fund. It's there to give opportunities to children to enter into other activities. And I think one thing that I would be very, very keen on pursuing and making sure that we see some oversight on that is there are some really large funds in here. There are funds that are pushing on £100,000. And I'm really keen that these funds are not seen as savings pot for a rainy day. I'm really keen that schools understand the purpose of the fund, and that there is some, for these, particularly for these very high funds, there's some kind of strategy or approach that they understand about how these funds are going to be used to benefit the pupils in the future. So that's my final word. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ian. It's about fundraising, but it's also about fund spending for the benefit of the young people. Thank you very much, everyone, for contributing to that item. And I'd particularly like to thank Dr. Richard Jones and his team for, certainly I've drawn a lot of assurance and a real sense of commitment to continuing to improve this space. So thanks, Ian, and your team for the audit, and to Richard and his team for their positive and constructive responses. I will move us on to item 7, which is another swap audit, another swap limited audit on fuel usage. And Ian and Kate are going to introduce and lead from SWOT. And for the council, we have Councillor Jackie is with us, and we have Matt Perry and Harrod Hyde and Paul Wozencraft from the team to talk about the management action and the response. So Ian, if you could start us off, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the report is in item 7 on the agenda. The audit reviewed fuel usage arrangements across all council services, not just HTR, but they included depot fuel, fuel cards, procurement of fuel, security, how those costs were allocated, and the data quality behind some of the systems. The audit identified a number of significant control weaknesses around fuel governance, monitoring, and data quality. The most significant of these were the absence of documented fuel management procedures, were inadequate oversight on fuel usage, were weakness in fuel card controls, and the continued purchase of fuels under an expired contract without a formal agreement in place. The audit found poor quality data on fuel, and that this limited the council's ability to analyse fuel usage effectively. There were some positive findings from the report. The council has an established fuel distribution system that uses key fobs that protect the dispensing of fuel. Those fuel costs were allocated in the system to the relevant services, that fuel audits are regularly undertaken, and that fuel tank levels are monitored periodically. A key theme, though, throughout the review was the management and monitoring arrangements were not sufficiently developed at the time. And whilst the audit identified important weaknesses, management has accepted the findings and have put together an improvement programme that has been agreed to address all the risks. Chair, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ian. I'll invite Matt. Matt, am I going to you or to Paul to introduce the management response?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If it's okay, if I can just say a few words, and then and I can pick up any technical questions. But can I just say that the head of HTR is unavailable this morning, John, due to commitments with transport appeals, but Anara, as you obviously was the senior manager for corporate fleet and business development, to pick up any technical questions. But I think just to set out, I want to give Governance and Audit Committee the assurance that management has responded promptly and proportionately to the fuel usage audit findings. The audit resulted in a limited assurance opinion, so it did reflect weaknesses in governance, documentation, management oversight, but it did not identify any evidence of fuel misuse, fraud, or deliberate non-compliance. Just to give yourself, Chair, and the board assurance, there is a structured fuel audit action plan now in place to address the findings. There's clear actions focus on compliant procurement, standardised procedures, improved fuel monitoring, stronger tank security controls, clearer emergency access arrangements, and better financial coding. The actions are designed to reduce governance, financial, operational, and reputational risk as well, while maintaining the resilience required for critical highways, winter service, and emergency response functions. Again, just to give you assurance, progress will be monitored through service management arrangements with improvements embedded into wider fleet asset and compliance frameworks to ensure controls are sustainable and auditable as well. So that's where we are. Just to give, we have got an action plan. Much of it is on target to be achieved in the next few weeks and months. But as I said, Anara is due to pick up any technical questions then, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. Thanks. I'll open up for questions from committee members. John is the first question.
Thank you, Chair. My question really is to Ian. I mean, I read this report and I was frankly horrified about the thing. It seemed to me that there were very limited assurance could be given, if at all. Can I ask you to explain how you came to the final assessment?
Thank you, John. I think one, I have some difficulties with trying to put an audit into one word and the outcome. That can sometimes be difficult. And I think it's important to focus on the actions. But in terms of this limit, why did I give this a limited assurance? Is what you want to know. The opinion was limited rather than no, because whilst there are significant weaknesses that were identified, a number of the key controls still remained in place. So there were key controls in place, and the audit therefore found weaknesses in the effective, some weaknesses in some of the effective control in some of the controls, rather than a complete absence of control. And I think that's the difference. A no assurance opinion would normally indicate that controls are largely absent altogether or entirely ineffective, or there are indications of fraud in place. And my opinion was that we were not in that position, not quite, not far off, but we were not quite in that position. So because there are systems and controls that are embedded and working, this is about looking at some improvements around data quality, monitoring and oversight arrangements that need to build on those already existing controls. So that's why I gave it a limited opinion, John.
Yeah, I hear what you say. I'm still surprised though that it's the arrow on the diagram on page 73 is sort of halfway up the limited. It does seem to me to be a very generous assessment, to say the least. Thank you.
I think that's fair. It could have been nearer the line without doubt.
I think so.
Nearer the line without doubt.
So my interpretation, Ian, of your answer is that if and we don't, we absolutely don't, but if we had a limited scale, this report would be pretty close to the bottom of the scale of limited and quite close to none.
It would be nearer to a no. It's certainly lower down in the limited assurance scale, but in our sector there are no scales. A scale doesn't exist. But in my professional opinion, it's certainly at the bottom end of the limited assurance.
In your professional opinion, it's at the bottom end. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Ian. And I do appreciate that this is it's not a numbers game. There is objectivity and subjectivity and matters of judgment here as well. It's not a scorecard exercise. So thank you, John, for your question, and Ian for your answer. Councillor Pete, I can see you want to come in. Do you want to come in the same point or a different point?
A mix of both, please, Chair.
You're very welcome, Councillor Pete.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess it's almost like that's our first point was almost like the second time I sort of heard that answer from me and around this, bigger, wider look and an opinion and all that. And as you say, that's fair enough, and I understand that, Ian. I just wonder if there's some way of actually putting words to that effect in the report, so you don't continually keep on getting asked the same question beyond the numbers game, to just try and bring alive for us, your other bit of thinking beyond the numbers. That was just the first point. And then the second point is looking down all the actions, Chair. We either passed the agreed deadline dates for them. We're rapidly approaching the 31st of July for the others, and I think there's only one going out to November. So have they all been done?
Thank you, Pete. You took that very question right out of my mouth. Brilliant. Thank you. Yes, it would be very helpful to know, Matt and Harrod, what the status of all of the actions are, because as Pete said, we are pretty at or close by one. So it would be good to have assurance around the paper.
Chair, we're losing your connection.
Oh, have you got me again?
We have now, yes.
Right. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Really, Pete's question about dates and assurance on that.
Yeah, I'm happy to come in on.
Thanks, Harrod. I've just found you on my box.
No, you're okay. So yeah, I'm Harrod Hyde. I'm the senior manager for Fleet. I'm stepping in for John Forsey today. So as regards to the dates, yes, everything, we have updated all the processes, and we have created a working group in regards to the fuel cards, because the fuel cards aren't just used within HTR, they're used across the whole council. And from our perspective, it is causing some issues. So we have asked, we've created a working group to try and figure out how we best move those forward. But everything is completed. We have even created, I know that one of the concerns was the responsibility section. So we have created a responsibilities to go in the handbook, which is going to be reissued imminently. It's not just this that we're waiting on. That's the only thing for the handbook. There's a few, the driver's handbook, there are a few other things that that are coming to go in that. But yes, we have all of the updated action logs have been done, especially one of the key issues was the being out of contract. We have just finished a compliant procurement process, and award letters will be issued now imminently, with a compliant supplier in the north and in the south, which will obviously remove that issue from the report.
Thanks very much, Angharad, and thank you for joining us today and for giving us that assurance. There were 2 or 3 of the actions required. It seemed to suggest that they required a discussion with your system provider. Could you give us an update on that? Are there any? Is that all okay, or are there any potential delays due to needing to talk to your system provider or anything?
So one of the issues that we had with our system provider was the breaking down of the so we use a system called TriScan, which logs all the fuel that's removed from all of the tanks. So as Ian said, they have a fob and then they have a pin as well. So there are 2 systems to stop them, not to stop them, but to allow them access to the system. And TriScan doesn't split doesn't split the vehicles up into their areas. So we've been working with Digital to create an internal system that would allow all the fuel data to be put into our internal system, and for that to be sent out to service areas for them to sign that off, because currently Fleet are signing off all the fuel usage, which I don't know what social services use for those particular vehicles, or it's not aligning. So yes, we have had those conversations, and Digital are creating us a portal at the moment.
Thank you. Right, that's good to know that you're endeavouring to establish workarounds where there are limitations in the system to respond to the report. That's incredibly helpful. I'm going to just give one more final call for questions, and I'm going to move to sum this item up. So in summing up, as Councillor Pete identified, the final date on the report for an action point to be discharged is the 30th of November. So can I suggest to GAC colleagues that because of the scale of concern that's been expressed around this report, and that it is very limited in the interpretation of Ian's assessment, that we invite Matt and his team to bring us an interim and more detailed report to our internal audit working group in the autumn, probably, maybe September, October time, so that we can have a deeper examination of progress against the management actions. And then after November, my understanding is that SWAP will undertake a follow-up anyway when all of the actions are due to have been discharged. So we could expect a follow-up audit to be conducted in Q4 of this audit cycle, but we'll take a stock take report in the early autumn at our internal audit working group. Would colleagues be satisfied with that way forward? Yep. So we'll note the report and we'll move forward with that action. Ian, is that a satisfactory way forward for you as head of internal audit?
Yes, Chair, I think that's an excellent way forward.
Right, okay, thank you very much, and we'll look forward to hearing more from Matt and Angharad and the rest of the team. Thank you very much. I'll move us to your third report, Ian, and that's agenda item 8, and it's volunteers and safeguarding audit. If Ian, if you could introduce the item, and we have Councillor Richard Church is with us, and Gemma, I think, is supporting as well. So, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Third and final report for today, and this is on volunteers and safeguarding. I think it's important to recognise, as Jane mentioned earlier, actually, this report was commissioned by Nina as part of the safeguarding board. So again, it's looking at areas that the council wants to know more information about and having that independent assessment. So that's a really good and healthy relationship between internal audit and the council. The review recognised that safeguarding is an area where the council has a very low risk appetite. And that was probably born out of fear to a certain degree in this area. This is in some cases appropriate, but it's not like that for all areas where the council have volunteers, and therefore it depends on the individual circumstances, because these circumstances are different. So a single blanket policy is not necessarily risk-based, and some of these decisions should be about the risk that these volunteers face and the balance between allowing those volunteers to undertake the role. However, there should be clearly safeguarding processes that they should go through. So the audit found that safeguarding governance was well established through the Corporate Safeguarding Board, with evidence of reporting, self-assessment and oversight arrangements. However, the review identified that arrangements for managing volunteers was not consistently applied across all services, and in particular we found issues with training requirements, with DBS clearance arrangements, and with central oversight, and in particular the fact that there was no central record of volunteers. So we didn't really know the bigger picture about what volunteers we had as an organisation. And without knowing that, you can't therefore make sure the necessary processes have been followed. However, it's good to note that there were stronger arrangements in schools and other parts of the council, but in particular schools. The agreed actions focus on reviewing and clarifying safeguarding policies, strengthening mandatory training requirements, and developing records and enhancing self-assessment, which will give this process a much more robust framework. Chair, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much, Ian. And apologies from me, Nina. I did see you there, and I should have included you in my introduction, and especially when you actually commissioned the report. So I'll give Nina the opportunity to say something, and Gemma, about Councillor Church. Richard, would you like to come in first?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I will be brief. This is an issue which we have been concerned about within Safeguarding Board, and I act as the lead for the Cabinet on safeguarding. And we note that this audit came through an identification of the need to strengthen and centralise arrangements to support volunteers. We welcome the recommendations. It'll help us to support the work in progress, and in particular to deal with the gaps that exist in compliance with safeguarding policies. One thing I do want to emphasise strongly is that we value the role of volunteers across the council. They play a very important role in the work across a number of different services, and we want to ensure that appropriate processes are in place to support them, to protect the vulnerable people they work with, and to protect the volunteers themselves. But we need to emphasise that it's important that the arrangements need to be proportionate and appropriate, in line with the work that is undertaken in many different service areas. And sometimes the volunteers' role can be very limited and very brief. And I just think we need to prepare that in mind in considering the way that we ensure that the policies are properly applied.
Thank you very much, Councillor Richard. I'll ask Nina to come in now. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, Board. Nina Davis, Director of Social Services and Wellbeing. Firstly, I really welcome this audit. I'd like to thank SWAP for their work for undertaking the review at our request. The report is a really valuable assessment of how we are managing arrangements in relation to volunteers across the organisation, but for me really provides practical, helpful advice as how do we strengthen those arrangements and building on what Ian said in a really risk-based and balanced and practical way. So I really welcome the work and the recommendations. The audit recommendations that are in the report align with work that we've already started and is being progressed under the Corporate Safeguarding Board. And I really welcome that the audit found that safeguarding governance itself is well established under that board with clear oversight arrangements, reporting mechanisms and self-assessment processes in place. So we accept all the findings and the 5 recommendations within the audit. And within the report, we've outlined the actions that we are progressing and the timescales to address those recommendations as well. So since before and since receiving the report, that work has been in progress. So this includes a review of both safeguarding and volunteering policies, clarification of mandatory safeguarding training expectations, review of those DBS requirements, strengthening of safeguarding self-assessment processes, and consideration of how we can use corporate systems to provide a single source of information and oversight for volunteers across the council as well. So members will note the report recognises that there are many areas, particularly schools and some other service areas that already have very strong arrangements in place. So now it's to work to ensure that we achieve that same level of consistency and assurance across the whole organisation. In conclusion, the action plan is comprehensive. We've committed to delivery within the agreed timescales, and I'm confident the actions being taken will improve the assurance available to yourselves and to members regarding arrangements. And just a note as well, volunteers, as Councillor Richard said, really greatly valued across Powys County Council. And just want to finish by thanking all our volunteers. We appreciate all that they do. And this work that's in progress will really help strengthen our offer and support for volunteers across the county. Diolch yn fawr.
Thanks very much, Nina. And I think that the whole committee would echo your thanks to the whole community of volunteers across the whole county. I'm going to take Chair's prerogative a wee bit here. I'm speaking on behalf of Councillor Chris as well today. He sent me questions because he's unavailable on other Powys County Council business today. But I'm sure you know that Councillor Chris is very passionate about this area of business, and rightly so. You've spoken about improving the approach and overcoming inconsistencies. Councillor Chris had a question in that area, and notwithstanding the different roles that volunteers take across the council services, does this mean that you'll be having a centralised approach and a centralised service for safeguarding, or will it still be localised? What are you considering in terms of how you manage the more standardised approach and build on good practice where it exists, for example, in schools, as you said?
Chair, I'm happy to come in response to that. We will be looking at what all the options are could be as well, and to take learning from elsewhere into other perhaps local authorities as well. But at the moment, I would expect that the management of volunteers will remain within individual service areas as appropriate. I don't think centralised management is probably a road we will go down at the moment. As you've noted, volunteer roles vary hugely across the whole of the council. And what I really welcome in this audit and the recommendations is that a recognition of that it needs to be proportionate and risk-based and balanced depending on what those roles are. So I think what we tried to do is put in a very high level kind of policy that captured everybody. And actually, we need a more responsive, risk-based, appropriate response depending on the work that the volunteers are doing and in which service area. So there's probably going to be that kind of a response coming through. It's going to be a substantive item on our next Corporate Safeguarding Board agenda. As you would expect. And so you, as a committee, will have updates on the work and the actions coming through as part of your regular activity reports as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Nina. And Councillor Chris was also asking about exemplars that you could adopt and address. I think we've already heard that our own schools area is up there, but are there any other exemplars?
I don't know if Ian wanted to come in, Chair, but I know we do have good examples from across a number of different services. Thank you.
Thanks. Ian, do you have any suggestions for sort of learning in this area?
I think there are. I think there were other areas, although throughput was small within the council. I think that learning from other local authorities might be a way forward on this, and certainly some form of. I don't think you can call it benchmarking because that's probably a bit too number driven, but certainly learning from other local authorities. In terms of swap, I'm more than happy to canvass some of our partners as well to see how they deal in this area. But certainly I think that the balanced approach is the right way forward.
Thanks very much. Thanks both. It certainly sounds like Nina and her team are open to learning and sharing ideas, so that's very, very welcome. Are there any other questions for Nina or for Ian on this safeguarding internal audit? Councillor Adam.
Mine's not a question, mine's just a reflection that it was really good to see it sort of self-nominated out of an officer. And I just wonder how often that happens, whether Ian, you can reflect on how often we get suggestions for audit coming out of the teams themselves.
I think that's a really good question. I think the audit planning process includes lots of drivers that are more formal, like risks and previous weaknesses and sector risks. So there are all of those things that drive the audit plan. But you'd be surprised, there's a really good proportion where officers and members and the 151 officer help us then add greater relevance, I suppose, in a way, because they are Powys-based employees. They know what's happening within their own authority. So they add real relevance to our audit plan sometimes. So I'd say there's a good proportion of plans that are driven internally within the council.
Thank you. Thanks, Ian. Jane, I'll give you the last word.
Very quickly. I mean, just to say absolutely. And, for me as a 151 officer, if I don't or I'm not seeing the assurance that I need, then I will ask Ian to include that work in his audit plan. So I think, as I said previously, we don't shy away from looking at things where we do have any concerns. And that's recognised that, and unfortunately, we do see then some limited assurance reports coming through, but it just means we can tackle them and strengthen the arrangements to get that level of assurance.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Jane. On this basis, we're content to note Ian's report on volunteers and safeguarding, and thank Nina for opening up her area of business to this level of scrutiny and support. Everyone happy to note this report, and we'll move on to, thanks Adam, we'll move on to the corporate items. And item 9 is the whistleblowing annual policy review. And I'd like to do is just take item 9 and 10 together. We've got the annual whistleblowing report at item 10, and I'll invite. We've got Councillor. Have we got Councillor Jake today? No, we haven't. No, I don't think we have. Sarah Sarah Bufton to introduce both of these items. And lest I forget, there are a couple of questions in the chat from Councillor Pete on this. He's had to leave the meeting. So Sarah, if you could just briefly introduce both items and then we'll move to questions, including Councillor Pete's questions.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. Happy to take both agenda items together, Chair. So agenda item 9 is the review of the whistleblowing policy as provided for in section 22.29 of the Constitutions. Members will recall that following an update in the legislation, namely the Employment's Right Act 2025, that sexual harassment is now a qualifying whistleblowing disclosure. Accordingly, the policy was updated, and this can be found at page 101 of the pack. Members will note that sexual harassment has been included under section 1.3. I can confirm that the policy has been approved by the Democratic Services Committee and it awaits going before full council. Agenda item 10 is the annual whistleblowing report, which provides the number and types of concerns raised as provided for in section 22.31.2 of the Constitution.
Sarah, I have grave apologies from me. Gareth Hall, who's the Vice Chair, could I ask Gareth just to step into the chair? I think I need to deal with an issue in my home. If Gareth, you could just take the chair. With sincere apologies.
Not a problem.
Yep, certainly. Thanks. Yeah, carry on. Yeah.
Thank you. So item agenda on is number 10 is the annual whistleblowing report. As I just mentioned, it provides the number and types of concerns raised as provided for in section 22.31.2 of the Constitution. The report is found on page 113 of the pack and it covers the period of 2025 to 2026. The information provided within the report has been amended following consideration by the Governance and Audit Committee's working group. Members will note that 2 whistleblowing complaints have been received. One was taken forward and proceeded to investigation and one was withdrawn. The one which proceeded to investigation was partially upheld with the outcome on the 10th of April 2026. And we do have one outstanding investigation which is ongoing from the last period of March 2025. Of course, the complaints are confidential in nature, so the information that we can provide is somewhat limited. However, we have included at the bottom just the confirmation of which service area the complaints came from. So the complaint which was investigated came from Children's Services and as above it concluded in April 2026 and the second complaint which was ultimately withdrawn was under corporate service. Thank you.
Thanks for that. So I'll invite questions. Sorry, I can't see.
Vice Chair, if I may come in, Councillor Pete had put questions in the chat. They will have to be verbalised because obviously we are a public meeting. He has had to leave. So if
yeah, I'll have a look at those now. Yeah, what Councillor Pete says in terms of whistleblowing item 8, I wanted assurance that the points raised by working group of which he was a member have been included and perhaps the contents page could be updated to reflect this. That's his first question on item 8. He goes on then to talk about in section 9.4, there's an erroneous, in the second line there's an erroneous for, the word for, F-O-R. So a typo error there. And on item 9, he thinks that he thought that we were going to get details of lessons learned and assurances that have been followed through, and asks were there any impacts on the controls framework.
Thank you, Vice. Yes, I'm happy to take those questions.
Thanks, Sarah.
So in terms of the policy, I can confirm it was reviewed following the working group, and I have indeed noted the erroneous 4 at
Well done.
9.4. So we can absolutely get that corrected. In relation to lessons learned, obviously we have to be very cautious. We don't want to identify anyone. These are highly confidential, but that is certainly something that I can discuss with the monitoring officer to see if there is something that we could potentially consider in the annual reports moving forward. And I'm not aware of any impacts on the control framework following any of the changes made. Thank you.
Yep, thanks for that, Sarah.
Thanks very much, Sarah, and thank you very much, Gareth, for stepping in to the chair with no notice whatsoever. And apologies again, Sarah, for disrupting your flow. Any other questions or further questions from colleagues? If there are not, I think we are content to note the policy review, and we are content to note the annual whistleblowing report. And thanks, Sarah, for joining us today to speak to those 2 papers. Thank you very much, everyone. I'll move us on to agenda item 11, which is a regular item for us, the Corporate Safeguarding Board Activity Report, which Nina will lead us through in the usual way. Thank you very much, Nina.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. So the report in front of you today provides an update from the Corporate Safeguarding Board following its meeting on the 11th of June 2026 and outlines the key areas of safeguarding activity, assurance and improvement across the Council. So overall, the Board continues to provide strong oversight of safeguarding arrangements across the organisation, has received assurance across a number of important areas, with updates on safeguarding in both adults and children's services. Noting in adult services, safeguarding performance remains strong, with 97% of safeguarding inquiries completed within statutory timescales and positive feedback received from Care Inspectorate Wales. In children's services, demand remaining high, but statutory timescales continuing to be met, supported by effective multi-agency working. The board also reviewed safeguarding activity in education. There have been encouraging improvements in school exclusions and ongoing work to strengthen safeguarding oversight within schools. Significant progress has been made on school site safeguarding, with 112 safeguarding related works completed and strengthened partnership working between education, property and health and safety services. A key area of focus remains the mandatory training and VIDA SV training. So corporate compliance is high overall, with safeguarding training at 93.7% and VIDA SV training at 92.9%, noting the targets are at 90%, so above target. However, there are a couple of areas, particularly within the place services, that do require further improvement, and the board has requested additional insurance and improvement where compliance remains slightly below target in those areas. We're also keeping a close eye on the school compliance, noting the improvements being made, but the need for continued attention in those areas. The board also received updates on private fostering, regional safeguarding developments, housing, homelessness, safeguard and risk for young people, and preparations for future Welsh Government guidance on violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence. So in summary, the board was assured that safeguarding governance arrangements are active with oversight of key risks. There are areas where improvement activity continues, but we have got our next meeting coming up in September, as I noted earlier, and also a thanks. I wasn't actually at this meeting myself, so it was chaired very ably by Sharon Fruin in my absence. So just a thanks to her as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Nina. Thanks for that run through. I've got a couple of questions on behalf of Councillor Chris. And Councillor Chris very much welcomes this report, which shows some progress, particularly around mandatory training compliance. He refers to the table on page 118 of the pack, which is 2.6.2 in the paras. And it's about non-compliant staff, and he wonders how many have received no training as opposed to have other staff that have received no training?
I think, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Chris. It's a really important question. I think the question is, are there some of these staff who've never done the training?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and yes, we do have access to that information, and that is something that we regularly look at. And actually, at our senior leadership team meeting on Tuesday of this week, we were looking in detail across service areas at those people who have never completed, with actions agreed at senior leadership level to progress with those. So yes, that is a piece of information that we do look at regularly. Thank you.
Thanks, Nina. And on the same table, Councillor Chris identified place, the place team at 85.6% as being particularly at the low end, and he asks if there are particular actions, if there are particular reasons, and if there are particular actions that can be taken to bring that team more up to expected standards.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And just for information, place covers quite a wide variety of very large service areas. So you've got you've got housing, for example, you've got highways, transport and recycling, you've got planning, you've got cleaning, catering. So you've got some very large numbers of employees within that area. One of the actions I have taken is to request that those place numbers are broken down in future reports, so we can get a bit more detailed information of exactly where those service areas. So that'll come through for future reports for you. We do have that information, but it hasn't been shown in this report. And again, at senior leadership team meeting this week, we discussed with those service areas where figures are slightly lower. There are challenges. A lot of these staff perhaps have no access to computers. They're not office based. These are staff who are working in the front line, don't have access to ICT. So we have different arrangements in places to cover mandatory training, for example, which are more appropriate with toolbox talks, etc. So that is an area that we are looking at and refreshing and reviewing at the moment across the corporate and the senior leadership team. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Nina, for that comprehensive answer, and thank you. Any further questions on the safeguarding report, please? In which case, I trust we are content to note the report and to thank Nina and her team for providing all this valuable assurance information to this committee. Thanks very much, Nina. I'll move us on to agenda item 12, which is the Q4 Treasury Management Report, and we have Councillor David with us. I think we've also got James Chappell with us. But have we got him? I can't. Mary, is James here?
Yes.
Where is he?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, there you are. As soon as you spoke, you appeared on my screen. Thank you. Councillor David, do you want to say anything to the report, or will I go straight to James?
I'll just say some brief words because
thank you.
Obviously members will have read the report, but
of course.
A lot of the report refers to the capital programme, and just to say that I think, to its credit, the council's delivered significant capital investment during the year, over £63 million, and the underspend is mainly timing related, not performance issues. However, the report does identify future pressures with regard to the capital programme, particularly with regard to inflation and borrowing costs. I'd just say at a high level, the report does identify the Treasury activity as being prudent and controlled, with a focus on low risk and flexibility. And key pressures are identified within the report, particularly around rising debt levels, especially around social care, and economic uncertainty and interest rates. But I think it's fair to say that the overall position remains stable, but with future cost pressures expected. Thank you, Chair. I'm sure James would want to add some detail to that.
Well, thank you very much for that very concise assessment, Councillor David. It's very much appreciated. James, is there anything that you would like to add in particular? If not, we'll go straight to questions.
No, Councillor David's covered it all. Just in 3.6.2, just to draw the committee's attention that the total level of borrowing that the council had was 5.61 million less at the end of the financial year than the beginning of the year. So, we've kept close ties on funds there and make sure we've only borrowed exactly what we need to borrow.
Thank you very much, James. Thanks. Questions, please, colleagues? Gareth, I'll go to Gareth first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mine's more of a general comment on the capital programme, and it was precipitated by the previous agenda item, where in Nina's report on homelessness, it said that work had started on the feasibility study of making a future bid into the capital programme for capital investment in home for 16 to 18-year-olds, which is to be applauded. But to me, this begs the question. We've got details of the capital programme, and looking at wider horizons into the 5-year medium-term financial plan. And for schools, for instance, they look at the whole process from start to finish over 15 years. So the question I'm asking is, does the council have a handle on these embryonic proposals, which are sort of pre-pipeline, which further down the track could eventually result in bids into the capital programme? And just to get a handle on the scale of this and the reality of it. In one extreme, they could be overambitious. In the other, they could have schemes almost shovel ready that could respond to the offer of grant aid. So it's how do they do that juggling act, for want of a better description?
Thanks very much, Gareth. Jane, that's going to land with you, I think.
I think so. So services, as they identify potential projects, there is a requirement for a very detailed business case to accompany any proposals. So there'll be various stages before you get to that in terms of discussion, understanding, looking at how we transform service delivery and how we can address service demand in all sorts of ways. So those initial conversations may well lead to a capital scheme being proposed. And I think we've seen that in the past with children's services, where we've been able to accommodate looked after children locally rather than having to send them out to expensive placements. So yes, we routinely do that as we look across all of our services. A robust and detailed business case is the first port of call, and those business cases are considered through the Capital Oversight Board, and that's not for an approval, but it is for an overview of whether or not those business cases include everything that they should, whether they are detailed enough, whether they are robust enough, and whether they've actually factored in everything that is needed. So it goes through that internal process before any projects are actually proposed to Cabinet or Council for approval at a later stage. We would look then to around potential funding streams, and that could mean that we're able then to apply for grant funding and so on and so forth to progress some of those. So all of that is built in at that stage. We do have a 5 and 10-year capital programme within which we try to accommodate all of these asks. We haven't routinely included in that programme things that haven't been approved as yet.
Right.
But I think we're looking at whether we need to actually reflect some of those. But absolutely, having those schemes ready to go, should those funding opportunities come along, would really help us be able to deliver some of those things that we need to going forward. So there's a whole mix of things that we do, but that's roughly the process that we would go through to get to that point. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it helps very much. It's just, you touched on the point where I was getting at, is do you have a handle on the totality of this, even when some of the proposals are at a very embryonic stage?
And I think in part, I won't say we've got a total oversight of everything. I would say there'd be some things that probably haven't come through yet. But in terms of doing that whole life costing piece as well, and looking at the costs associated with delivering net zero and all of those things, I think committee and members will be aware that we have a lot of meat on the bones in terms of leisure and how we would support that, schools and what's needed over the very, very many years to actually be able to maintain that level of estate. And that, of course, is something that we keep a key eye on. And as I've said many times before, when you look at those figures, they are staggering in terms of
Yes.
the investment needed. And really, the council is not in a position to be able to afford all of that
Exactly.
over the short, medium, or longer term. So, absolutely having sight of that at that macro level helps us and helps council be able to prioritise the investment that we do have the ability to raise, and external funding is always welcome in terms of helping us to get to that place.
Thanks.
Thanks, Gareth. Thanks, Jane. I've got two further questions. I'll bring in John, and then following John, Councillor Adam. John.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about on the sundry debt table on 311.3, which is on page 132. I'm looking at the age debt, and particularly that over 90 days old. I accept totally the reasons given for the high levels from social services because of the restrictions you have. But looking down, I see that we've got over £1 million owed to us by through highways over 90 days. It seems a very high figure. Do you know why that is, James, at all?
In the past, it's been things like bonds and that we hold. I don't know exactly what it is at the moment, but when I think this has been brought up in the past, it's things like bonds. But certainly I can have a look and see if they're, those things are. Well, I'll have a look and get back to you, John.
It's shot up over last month. And the other question I have is right at the bottom on the last appendix, I think. I'm scrolling down. Yeah, on page 142, which is the breakdown of VAT receipts and so on. An awful large proportion seems to be under planning and regulatory services. Can you explain that, James?
Well, I think there's a breakdown of the reasons why there. Obviously, where the supply is not to Powys County Council. It may be dependent on what sort of works that planning is looking at, but perhaps we can I'll delve in and get a bit more detail.
Well, the bulk of it is in no invoices.
Uploaded to the Barclay card system, purchase card system. I'm not sure off the top of my head. Sorry, John. We'll have a dig and have a look.
Okay, thank you.
Kath, can we make sure that John's 2 points are added to the action log so that we can chase up the responses, please, if needs be?
Yes, of course, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your questions, John. Thanks. Councillor Adam.
Thank you, Chair. Two points if I may. One sort of the inner details. I think, Jane, you were touching on this, which is people bringing forward business cases and your 5 and 10 year view. I just wonder whether push a little hard and say, are we seeing things like we see with Mid-Wales Growth Deal, like differentiation between outline business case and full business case? So I think it's Gareth's point. Are we seeing the pipeline before the pipeline?
Yeah.
And the outline business case, and whether you've got whether our project planning processes, these ideas emerge, have that sort of categorization in them. So there might be one called wish list, and there might be an outline business case, and there might be one called full business case. So we can see their progression. And I also wanted to just Jack, you talked about 5 and 10 years, but I also think that we should be putting some markers in, because some of our assets, capital assets, come to a close point, or come to a point of massive repair or replacement in 10, 15, 20 years time. I just wonder whether we have a sense of when we're going to hit these cliff edges of certain capital assets. A leisure centre that I know of in about 10 years time probably requires a full rebuild. And it's just seeing that list, which might actually be 20 or 25 years out. So that was my first one, which was a set of sort of technical questions that help us give clarity. And then my second one was, it's very good for us to see this. and it's very good to know that this is inside the, the Capital Oversight Board. And I'm just sense checking myself. Is this level of detail also, and I should know because I sit on the finance panel now, in terms of its oversight and governance, is this also lodged inside of finance panel, who obviously can give greater attention to the financial issues than we as governance and audit can? So just as two questions, one around ABC, FBC, 5-10 years time frame, and then is this being lodged inside of for scrutiny input by finance panel?
Thanks very. I can see both Matt and Jane have got their hands up. Matt, I'll go to you first, and then Jane can round off this item, I think.
Yeah, just to pick up on Councillor Kenley's point around the assets, we have, as many members are aware, we've got a number of assets across the authority, from depots, schools, and we have got condition surveys of those assets, and they're all RAG rated then in terms of when certain assets would incur sort of health and safety issues if they deteriorate. So we have got a plan in terms of what assets are a priority, but ultimately, we can't afford to run everything, and there will come a time then we will have to consider how we rationalise those assets. So I hope that covers it, Chair. Thank you.
I think it's more about just making sure that's visible, fully accepting that we can't fund them. It's the I think the point you made, the ability to look down the line 5, 10, 15, 20 years out. I probably not to pick on farm estate, but to make sure we avoid farm, where we are with the farm estate, which is assets out of condition, but with no particular visibility in the past.
Thank you, Councillor Adam, for your question, and thank you. Now I have the Chief Executive, so I'm choosing between who to bring in next and who to give the final word. I'm going to bring in Jane, and then I will invite Emma, our Chief Executive, to sort of to have the final word, and then I'll draw this item to a close. Jane.
Thank you, Chair. So there was a lot to unpack, I think, in what Councillor Adam was saying there. So I think in terms of those project ready or funding ready projects waiting for that investment, I think we've started to pull that list together. I think there's more to do to strengthen that complete picture across the organisation. As I said, we've got a 5 and 10 year plan, but you're absolutely right. We know a lot of that information, but do we have it all in one place? I think we could do more to make that more visible. And I think that would really help members of council appreciate, the challenge that we have, because as I've said many times, we cannot afford to deliver everything that we need to do. And that's why we look at property rationalisation. That's why we look at disposals. That's why we really consider what assets we need to hold for that statutory delivery element of the council. So absolutely, by having more clarity for everybody in terms of that, it will be much easier for everybody to focus and prioritise where that scarce resource is actually utilised to the best effect. So yeah, thanks.
Thanks very much, Jane. And just before I bring Emma in, thank you to Councillor Adam and Gareth for raising that strategic context. It's really important that GAC has assurance that those plans and prioritisation arrangements are in place, and that we are deriving value for money, both from our current assets, our disposals, and our future planning. And it will be for other governance fora within the council to examine the detail and support the prioritisation, but it's helpful for GAC to have assurance that Jane and her team and the rest of the executive are working on those kind of prioritisations, which drive a value for money and effective expenditure from the public purse. And I'll bring in our Chief Executive, Emma, for hopefully a final word on this agenda item.
Thank you very much, Chair, and Prahanda, everyone. I won't repeat what colleagues have said, but I think the element of using the farm estate as an example is a real reality that's happening before our eyes now. You know, we cannot afford the infrastructure that we've got, no matter whether it's farms, schools,
Excuse
leisure,
me, I just
and
need to step
others.
out again. Gareth, can you take over?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So, so I think that the main point here is why, in terms of sustainable powers and understanding the future of powers, is so critical, and that's why, from a council perspective, those principles were adopted so that we continually need to review, and we need to be positioning that information because it's down to choice at the end of the day in terms of priorities, because just the financial envelope isn't enough for us to do everything that we would all like to do. And you know that is going to mean change for our communities. But I completely agree, Councillor Kennelly, in terms of, you know, we've done condition surveys, we do feasibility, we do business cases as a matter of course, and those go through the respective governance and then ultimately through the governance in terms of decision making. And in some areas in which we're working through those business cases, of course, it's not just down to the local authority. Sometimes in certain areas of the authority, we also have to engage with Welsh Government, and we also go through their level of governance. So there's an additionality there for some aspects of the work that we take forward. But I completely agree in terms of the visibility and that the long term visibility of those aspects. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Emma, and apologies. Sorry, Gareth. Sorry, Emma.
No problem.
Right, Adam. How many times have I said the final word? Adam, the final word on this item could be yours.
And then it was just the bit of the question that wasn't answered there. You touched on it, which you touched on one half, which is let's make it all visual. And I thoroughly agree. I think a lot of what you said, Jane, Emma. I wholeheartedly agree that there's some really big stresses. We're looking here at a capital program. So the final bit of the question was, when you touched on governance and oversight, is it finance panel that gets that is the key place where this gets looked at as a first protocol for members to have that full oversight and understanding?
Jane?
I think in terms of the governance side of it, we've had a capital working group through Governance and Audit Committee. You know, their role is very much around that governance perspective and making sure that that framework exists and is robust and everything. So I know I can see John's appeared on the screen, and I know he led that working group, and we've done an awful lot of work through that group around that. So I think it lies there rather than in finance panel. I think in terms of the capital schemes, that scrutiny very much lies at each of the scrutiny committees, because that's part of performance, getting that value for money and so on at a service level. So it sits there. So I think really that's where it sits best.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Jane. I think I will move us on, and apologies again for my having to pop away from the chair with no notice. Sincere apologies to all members and those in attendance. Thank you very much, James, for the Treasury Management Report, and to colleagues for the strategic discussion which has ensued. I will move us on to agenda item 13, which is our report on our working groups. It's only 3 weeks since we last met, and none of the working groups have met in that 3-week period, so there is nothing to update there. And then I'll look at agenda item 14, which is a summary version of our work programme with a focus on the agenda for our next formal meeting, which is on the 28th of September, and invite any comments on that draft agenda forward work plan. No comments on that. Oh, Gareth, I can see.
Yeah, no,
Gareth and then John.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I was just thinking about what Jane said about the role going forward of the Capital Working Group in looking at ongoing oversight of this governance of the totality of the potential bids into the capital programme over the very long term. And I'd like that to be discussed at a GAC meeting, because maybe this is something for GAC proper to do. It can use a subcommittee, but I wouldn't want to have the subcommittee designated to do it.
I think that's a really important point, Gareth, and thanks for raising that, because I think really, and it's really for senior officers to determine going forward, but a GAC working group probably needs to be contextualized in a more considered governance regime for capital. So I think what I think we're encouraging ourselves to do, particularly looking at Emma and Jane, is it could be timely to take stock of governance around capital planning and the whole patch, because the capital working group of this committee had a particular role, and it would be a worry if it kind of inadvertently assumed a role by kind of evolution or organic growth that wasn't the original intention. That would actually potentially obscure governance rather than enhance it. And I think it's really important that we have a considered governance arrangement around that, and it's really for senior officers to think about that first.
Totally agree.
Thanks.
Thanks, Gareth, for saying that, and Jane, thank you. I'll go to John and then to Councillor Adam.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to make the point that it occurs in September or October every year that we get an agenda which is going to be absolutely enormous. It's going to be a book of very, very many pages.
It is.
For us to go through.
It is.
And I know it's difficult, but I just wonder if it could be split.
Yeah. I'll leave that one with Kath and the Secretariat team. I would agree that possibly the meeting needs to be split, or possibly we need an extra hour, Kath. But I'm not suggesting we discuss the handling of that right now, but I'll leave that with the Democratic Services team. As John rightly points out, we've got two hefty governance documents there in the annual financial statements, the annual governance statement, and we've also got agenda item 5, which will be the panel performance assessment, together with the management response to the PPA report. And I suspect that item will attract quite a lot of consideration as well. So we'll leave that with Democratic Services, John, but thank you for raising. Councillor Adam.
I think so. Just working back through, I too, I would prefer. We gave the right amount of time for the work in front of us, whether that's a longer meeting or 2 meetings. But over to you. I probably would also agree with panel performance assessment that this is just an ordering issue. That feels to me that that appearing towards the front of the meeting probably helps set a lot of context, because that's an external perspective that would then flow. And I also wanted just to touch on the one point you raised, and then Gareth came in behind, which is I do think it's interesting that I know timely that we should look at this issue of capital, because capital interplays with revenue. And we do have a scrutiny committee wholly dedicated to whole budgets and our finance, and that is finance panel. So I do think it's a good time just to say, are the right bits going to the right places? That'd be welcomed. The actual reason I put my hand up and the question was on Audit Wales work programme. And again, apologies if I've missed it. Audit Wales are due to be doing something around on governance, and there was and the brief for that. And I know you've been involved in that, Lynn. Is that what we're beginning to hear? Is there a timetable set for that? And are we as a committee looking again at the brief or the timetable for it?
The Audit Wales governance work, the Audit Wales governance review was it ended up to be most helpful to Powys County Council. It was framed around sustainable Powys, so it emerged not as just without being pejorative, a generic governance review. It emerged as a governance review very, very directly linked to sustainable Powys, not least because Emma and the executive team felt that that would be the most constructive and appropriate way to use the governance review to support the authority's ways of working and strategic priorities. And we received that report a few months ago, and it was given examination and a presentation. But you may have forgotten about that because it wasn't framed exactly as a governance review. It was contextualised around sustainable Powys. But I'll bring Emma in to say a wee bit more as well.
Yes, so we were at odds, if you remember, Chair, with Audit Wales around this one and how it originated. But you're quite right. The report came through a number of months ago, and we accepted the recommendations. We've got management responses in place around that, and that'll come through in terms of the tracker. You have got the tracker on your next agenda, actually. But also, don't forget, when the performance panel assessment comes forward, one of the judgments that the panel have to give is whether we're fulfilling our requirements in line with the Local Government and Elections Act. And that looks at efficiency, effectiveness and governance within that. And I won't give away the outcome of that, but you will have that outcome in the September meeting as part of that published report. Is that okay?
Thank you, Emma. Thanks very much
You're welcome.
for that intervention. Adam, Councillor Adam.
No, just thank you for the clarification. I do fully remember the audit report on sustainable Powys. I think I must have missed the meeting where it was decided that would be the breadth and depth of the Wales Audit Governance Report, but noted.
No, it wasn't. I mean, that wasn't a decision that we made at a meeting, Councillor Adam. That's how Audit Wales and the management team in Powys finalised the remit and scope of that particular audit. It had been on the Audit Wales audit plan as a governance review for more than a year. And then once it was being the remit and scope were being finalised, it was linked directly to sustainable Powys. Wasn't a decision or something
noted.
that this committee.
Thanks.
The committee didn't decide that. Emma?
No, and I think the other element in terms of wider governance, we get an annual report, don't we? An annual summary from Audit Wales. Not only, that looks at our accounts, our governance and in terms of our performance as well. So that then collates all of those different audits that we have through the year. And don't forget, in terms of our own mechanisms, we've also got SWAP, which we hear from on a regular basis in terms of our local arrangements there. So in its broadest terms, Councillor Kenley, that is the sort of those together start forming the governance element. And then, of course, on top of that, we have separate reports with regulators. That also is a contribution to our overall understanding in terms of our governance and views from professionals. So you won't have one single item as such, because it's all of those different components that contribute to that overarching view.
Yes. Thanks, Emma. Exactly. Thank you. I'll pause. If there are no further questions on the forward work programme, I will thank members for their contributions, thank all officers and cabinet members and portfolio leads for their attendance, and thank teams who were involved in contributing to the success of this meeting, whether it's teams who are actually with us at the meeting or in the background supporting the work on the papers. This committee is very grateful for all of the contributions that people make to support its business. Thank you everyone for your attendance. If members could stay for a short reflection, I'll say thank you to everyone else and close the formal meeting. Thank you.